welcome everybody. Today is Wednesday, 27th of May, and this is the Metal3 Community meeting. So let's start maybe with an introduction round if we have new people who are just joining the call now and would want to introduce themselves. Then I will pause for a couple of seconds and take the opportunity if you want to introduce yourself. Okay, then let's dive in. Then let's talk about this, revisit the discovery feature.
Yeah, so I added this. It was just really to sort of gauge interest in this as a potential feature. In the early days of Metal3, we discussed this as an idea of exposing the discovery feature of Ironic. And the idea was that you could power on a node, have it boot the discovery round disk, and automatically show up as a bare metal host. So one reason this got dropped is because you generally can't discover the BMC credentials. So there's kind of there's some gaps in the data you're able to discover this way. But I've been having some discussions in the context of OpenShift deployment, and particularly in cases where you might start off booting the control plane manually and then switch over to enabling Metal3 and to deploy the workers. And the idea surfaced that maybe we should revisit this discussion. And in particular, there were some unknowns which could tie into that API design discussion that Zane started, where what does it look like if you register a new bare metal host, but it's not actually being managed yet because you don't have all the details you need. Is there some other concept missing about the the inventory versus the actual bare metal hosts that are ready for use? So I mean, we don't have to necessarily solve that here, but I just wanted to kind of gauge whether there was any interest, and if there is, then I can throw up a Metal3 docs PR where we can maybe get into some of the details and talk about the the interfaces involved. But yeah, I also was interested if anyone else had kind of looked into this area at all. I remember Russell threw this up as a placeholder and it just kind of dropped off the radar with all of the other things that were being worked on. But yeah, I just wondered if there's any thoughts. And yeah, and in particular, Zane, I know this could end up kind of touching on the interfaces for bare metal host, which you've been covering in the mailing list discussion. So yeah, I was interested to kind of get any ideas or any feedback before dedicating some time to a PR.
Yeah, so we had the in the state machine diagram, which is this part is still kind of aspirational, but we had a state in there that's like discovered before it starts trying to do anything with the BMC. So it's basically a state where the thing exists and the URL of the BMC, but you don't know the credentials. So I think I think it does make sense to go ahead and create that state. And then I think if we rev the API, we'd probably just do the same thing. I don't think we'd create a separate resource. We'd just have, you could create the thing, not give it any credentials yet, which you can do now. And I think it'll go into some sort of registration error state now, but instead just have it wait in like discovered state. That would be easy enough to do, and that makes sense.
Yeah, so that would certainly be one way of doing it. Where I started to get a bit confused is when you start considering fast track provisioning feature, and if you've already booted via whatever means the deployment round disk at that point, for discovery, you could, in theory, whilst it's still heartbeating, just give it an image URL without any BMC credentials and write an image. I'm not necessarily saying we should do that, but if you enabled that, then suddenly you have this requirement to maybe have some kind of notion of like an approval workflow. So you discover the host and then you need to make the decision that it's going to it's actually going to be provisioned with a specific image. Maybe that's kind of like abusing the abstractions too much, but yeah, that was another sort of area that a few folks mentioned, and maybe we could explore on a docs PR.
Yeah, I'd be reluctant to do that, just for a couple of reasons. One is that we normally do inspection first anyway. So I think if we went straight to provisioning from there, then you'd be skipping over inspection. And the other is that if you don't have any power control, you can't ever unprovision that host or shut it down or anything, right?
Yeah, so I think in the inspection comment, like you've actually done the inspection at the point of doing discovery. So that's how the discovery works. It basically does inspection, posts the results back to inspector, and then inspector then registers the host in Ironic. But you're right, the deprovisioning case is probably a good reason not to do that. Anyway, I mean, I guess we don't need to go down the rabbit hole here, but I just wanted to kind of like throw the idea up there and see if there's any interest. And if it sounds like there's probably no major objections, so I can spend some time on a docs PR and decide whether we want to get it on the roadmap or not.
Yeah, it would be also like quite interesting from our point of view, and specifically if we can get a state like where we have this kind of like discovered, like maybe not ready, but like discovered the node, so then we can act on like them popping up and take actions at that point.
Yeah, I mean, that was the kind of use case we were discussing, and it started off with kind of an OpenShift centric discussion where, some wrapper to manage inventory, which happens before you create the bare metal host. And then I remembered this this idea and thought it was worth discussing whether there's a more generic solution that would be useful to everyone. So it seems like it's maybe worth at least having a discussion.
Yeah, and there might be even like cases where like all the but we need to know the BMC address anyways, right? So there must be an input from the user.
I have thought a couple of times about, like right now we have, when you create the BMC credentials, you create a secret with the credentials, and then you give a pointer to that secret in the bare metal host. And I have wondered a few times about what if we had some sort of naming scheme for the secrets, whereby the bare metal host could just assume what the name of the secret was, and it would just check whether it was there or not, rather than you being able to specify any secret. And then you could have like, you could have a little script that that populates your BMC credentials from your spreadsheet of passwords or whatever, without having to touch the host, and then the host could be discovered separately and they would just join up automatically.
But we would still need to know the address of the BMC, right? Like that is like right now given as part of the BMH.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I guess Discovery can't tell us that, Steve, is that right?
Not really, no.
No, all of the out-of-band interfaces aren't discoverable, and apart from in the case where there's kind of default passwords that are known. But I don't think we can really rely on discovering any of the BMC details.
Okay, so we can really only get that there is a host there somewhere, and the hardware details out of it. I'll have to think more about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I didn't want to kind of sidetrack the meeting too much, but if people are interested, maybe give it some thought, and I'll put a docs PR up either later today or tomorrow, and we can discuss in more detail there.
Yeah, we could definitely start with a doc to like be a bit more interactive on the discussion.
Yeah, you maybe start with a Google Doc or something, and then take it to a PR. Maybe that would be easier.
Yeah, exactly. Because with GitHub, it's not as easy to put the comments related to each point and have it visible on the side that
yeah,
as it can be in Google Docs.
Yeah, no worries. Well, actually, what's triggered this discussion was I've been talking to Doug and Michael about this, and they weren't able to join the call today. So yeah, I'll see if we can kind of get some ideas into a doc and then share it, and yeah, we can decide the next steps from there.
That would be great.
Great, thanks everyone.
Is there any comments or any questions related to this point before we move on? Okay, then let's go to the next point. So the next point is it's a couple of like PSAs rather than it's just about like we found out some issues with the Metal3 setup. So the first one is this one, the ironic authentication. So we found out that well, basically, Ironic as setup right now is standalone without any authentication. So there is that's so that BMO can talk directly with Ironic. The thing is, because it's using host networking to be able to have the layer 2 connectivity, Ironic is reachable, like the API is reachable from any of the target nodes that has an IP address in the provisioning network, meaning that as long as there is such like that this condition is fulfilled, like any pod, workload pod can access the Ironic API and interact with it. So this issue is to track like how we want to solve this problem. A first option would be to add a simple authentication that is apparently already supported by Ironic. So it would be like to add it in both Ironic and BMO, and on top of that, like using HTTPS, because otherwise the passwords would be obviously like going through in clear, so like in plain text. So yeah, this issue is to track it. We are basically just starting the work now, looking into the different options that we have to fix this issue. So as long as this is this way, that there is no authentication on Ironic, and if you want to do like some kind of pivoting or something like this, or even just if your target nodes have an IP address in the provisioning network, we highly recommend that would not go to production or to any kind of setup where it's important to have the nodes like in place properly. Is there any question related to this issue?
Yeah, so there is actually an Ironic image PR that I pushed a while ago related to this issue, and the idea was to lock down the bind IP to only listen to the provisioning network. I guess that doesn't really help in the case where you've got a route to that network. So we probably do need the authentication, right?
Yeah, a solution where we could use that that approach would be if we had a reverse proxy as a container in that pod, and Ironic would be listening only on the local host, and then the reverse proxy would take care of the authentication. But that's one of the many options that we have to solve this problem.
Can someone remind me which part of the Ironic API is needed on the provisioning network?
This is because the Ironic Python agent communicates with Ironic this way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if we had like IPA so that it basically is configured to like send a DHCP query on the secondary interface or wherever, then we could like have it on another network, obviously. But there is a need to have this communication between IPA and Ironic and Inspector, obviously. Okay, then let's go to the second bug that we have to disclose. This so we found out an infinite loop in the reconciliation of Metal3. Sorry, cluster API provider Metal3, Capep3. So basically the problem is that there is a trigger so that whenever the BMH is updated, it triggers the reconciliation of the Metal3 machine. But there was bug that was introduced in the way that every time there was a reconciliation, that reconciliation was actually updating the BMH object, even if there was nothing changed actually on that object. But just because the resource version was changing, then it was triggering again the Metal3 machine reconciliation. So it was basically just like looping over. There is a fix for this that is now going through review for the master branch, and as soon as it's merged, then we will backport it to the release 0.3 branch, and then make a new release v0.3.2. Any questions on this, or should I continue? Okay. The next item, it's this Metal3 roadmap. So basically, I was giving a bit of thoughts on in which direction we want specifically CapM3 to go, but the Metal3 project in general. So I came up with a couple of items that would be some kind of like great to have things. So I put them in a document that I started. The idea is this is completely open, like, right? So like as long as you are part of the Metal3 dev mailing list, you are able to edit it. So it would be great, like if you have any like ideas of anything that would be good to have in the future in Metal3, then like to extend at a point for what you want to have. So like a couple of examples that have been already put in the doc. We could have like something describing quickly the bare metal host API changes that Zane has been like starting a discussion on. Then there is this ironic authentication. Then maybe having a network configuration option so that basically we could, before provisioning a node, do some network configuration through like using an SDN controller, like having a hook maybe or something that allows us to perform changes on the switch before the deployment. We could add support for info blocks for IPAM. There's also like this automated node remediation that is being worked on by Andrew, Near, Jan, and Ferus. And another point that we could have would be this like booting the target node via the virtual media, or having a network boot for all the nodes of the target cluster. And then like possibly having an in-place upgrade where you could just upgrade the nodes of your Kubernetes cluster while they would stay on the same hardware, so that you could take advantage of like reusing the same hard drives if you are using stacked storage like Ceph or something, so that then you would not lose the data at that point. So this document is just like to give some ideas that could be interesting to have. So if it can be helpful and to trigger a discussion on like where we want to head with this feature, that would be great. So yeah, like I'm just like waiting for comments and hopefully that we can use this. Yeah, so feel free to add your own cases or whatever you would want to see in the roadmap, and then we can take this later on in a discussion in one of the community meetings. Any comments, questions on this? No. Okay. Then the last point I have is about maybe setting up a small introduction session for the new members that are like joining the Metal3 community. there has been like lots of questions recently on Slack and like about Metal3 event, for example, and like how to do the provisioning of a cluster, etc. So maybe we could organize a one-time kind of online event where we would go through the basics of the project, like BMO CapM3, Metal3 event, and then show like an example deployment on Metal3 event, record that, and then we could of course post it on YouTube afterwards. Is there any feedback on this? Would this be a good idea, like something that you see needed?
Yes,
Definitely.
absolutely. Yeah.
Very good idea.
Yeah, I like this idea a lot too. What would be neat and something that I miss out a lot on is like people are doing work on things like the hardware classification controller and all different things that features of Metal3 that I may not use. I don't know if we want to get in the habit of doing more demos in general functionality. I'd like to see a lot more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and if but still the idea of a general, high-level overview, if you understand the proposal. So those are complementary, right? So specific functionality demos or a general overview. And for the general overview, I wanted to, I really like the idea, but wanted to expand it to maybe suggest if we can propose something with potentially a wider audience by like something like a CNCF webinar that happens. CNCF organizes regular webinars presenting topics. We could submit a proposal there to introduce Metal3 and well, present this type of overview content to a more general audience.
That would be particularly great, and specifically with the timing, if like we get an answer related to our CNCF application, like as soon as we would get into the CNCF landscape, then we could propose a webinar also on this new project.
Yeah, actually, we could do it before, as as one of the steps in parallel to the application to give more visibility to the project. I mean, those webinars are not restricted to CNCF, existing CNCF projects. So.
Yep, that would be great. Maybe I can like look around to see how we could apply to do one of those webinars, and like keep you updated on Slack about this.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about it on Slack.
And related to the point about like that having more demos, maybe we can like add, like as it's done in Capi right now, that there is a specific place for demos, so that we can do them at the beginning. Like 2 weeks ago, we had Digambar and his colleagues presenting the hardware classification controllers. We could also have another like a regular slot, let's say, for this kind of demo. For example, we could have a demo like maybe like if we have some time at the end of the meeting, we could have already a demo on this like IP address management for static allocations in CapM3 that got merged like very recently now in the master branch.
Yeah, that will be great, because at the end we should share that in.
So I can modify the template so that like next time we have this demo slot in the next meeting. Okay, shall we move then to the next point, Sumit?
Yeah, Mel, thanks. So currently we were testing the deployment using the kind instead of Minikube, and so we had a couple of questions like, is it supported in CI? Like CI has kind enabled, so that, I mean, there are no failures in CI till now.
So kind is in the CI when you run with Ubuntu. So all the CI runs that use Ubuntu are using a kind cluster.
Okay, so so it is running well right now, because we are actually facing some issues. So maybe we can discuss on the Slack channel.
Sure.
But yeah, that was just a query. We are
It-
getting some errors in the IP addresses, so I will verify with you.
Feel free to post the questions on our cluster API bare metal channel.
Sure, I'll do it.
Okay, so then next, maybe we would, like, instead of just forcing like now this IPAM demo in the middle there, we could maybe like go to the triage first and then see if like there's some time remaining after, like look at the demo if people are interested.
If we don't have time today, maybe we can do it in the next community meeting.
Yeah, sure. That would be actually probably making more sense.
Yeah. So put it in there.
Mail, just a question. Is this related to static IP addresses and those are to be used in the entire dev environment, or something different?
It's not yet integrated with Metal3 Devenv.
Okay.
So there is no example there of using this IPAM feature.
Okay.
It's the next thing on our to-do list for this specifically. So the idea is that we would put a data template that contains network data that uses this IPAM feature to fetch IP addresses and configure them statically on the node instead of using DHCP.
Okay.
Yeah. So we could put an example in Metal3 Devenv.
Okay. Yeah, that demo would be helpful because it will be.
Sure.
Yeah.
Then let's have a demo on this next week. Next meeting. Sorry.
Sure.
Is there any other point before we move to the triage, the issue triage? Okay, then I'll stop sharing, and Stefan, you will take over.
Yep. All right, let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. So it looks like there's 8 untriaged issues this morning. So let's take a look at the first one. Bare metal host registration sporadically takes a long time, 10 to 15 minutes.
So this does appear to be a bug with the operator. Have a PR that may help. It would be useful if people could test it out, and even more useful if people could review that and we could get a match to see if that resolves it, because if it doesn't, I'm not sure what's going on.
Okay. I don't know if the reporter would be willing to test out the PR, but
Well, I can contact him directly if you want some, like if you want him to test something.
yeah, it might be helpful. Or if I mean, it looks like this PR doesn't break anything, so if we think it might improve things better, but can take.
Okay, I can ask him to give it a try.
Let's take a look at the next one. When there are no hosts to compare and validate, proper message should be displayed in logs like no hosts found. So this is for the hardware classification controller. Okay. Is this a bug or is it something else?
I mean, we logged this issue as an enhancement. So, Digambar, if you are there, you can.
Currently, we are working on proper messages, logs, like we have in DMO. So that's the reason I asked him to create the issue, because we are asking all you guys to have proper messages in SCC also.
Okay.
So that user will get to know.
So maybe a feature then, if you're working on logs as an enhancement.
Yeah, you can assign it. It is not a feature, but it is kind of a little bit improvement. Make it a feature. That's fine.
Yeah, I don't think there's a good categorization for it, maybe. Okay.
Yeah, then.
Do you know what the priority of this might be? Is this something on the backlog, or you're working on it now?
Yeah, so we are currently working on it.
Okay.
Maybe I'll assign a person to that. Okay.
All right. Cool. All right. The next one is in the Ironic Inspector image. Our inspector expects a Swift URL. So it sounds like this was an issue in Inspector itself, that there's a PR open, an OpenStack for this.
Yeah, this actually will should come automatically when the packages will be updated. So it's should remain open until it's actually fixed, but there's nothing we can really do right now, from as far as I understood.
Okay.
And while we're talking about this pulling Ironic, just wanted to say that for this raw image thing to work, there is we need to now stay on master, because that's where the fix is. So we had at some point some discussion about moving maybe back to Usuri branch. If we want to use the raw image streaming, then we need to stay with the master as is now.
Was there an issue to move to the off of master?
No, it was just a discussion that was happening on Slack.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's just because we were now talking about pulling Ironic, so just wanted to mention that's why we can't right now go back to Usuri.
How often do we update Ironic? Does it happen if we're against master, does it happen every time we rebuild the image that we get updates?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So it depends how frequently the OOO packages are updated. And then we just have to be when we rebuild the image, if there is a new package, we get that in.
Okay. So the next one is for bare metal operator, asking for IBM-C hardware type support.
Yeah, this is ongoing. So it's a feature addition, let's say.
What about priority?
Well, it's being actively worked on, so I don't know if we need really a priority.
That's fine.
On this.
Next one is against the Metal3 docs repo.
Sorry if I interrupt about the IBM-C driver before. That's actually that depends also on an RPM package that is currently not present. So it's going to be added, and then after that, I think it's good to go.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
The next one we already discussed, which is adding ironic authentication. This is a new feature, right? Or is this more of a design discussion?
Well, we probably will have to start with a design proposal for this.
Okay.
And because it has a lot of different impacts in different places across the different images. So yeah, we'll probably go first with a proposal on the Metal3 docs.
That makes sense. The next one is Ironic cannot register hosts. So it looks like someone installed Metal3 and they're getting an error out of Ironic. It looks like they're getting a 503 back when posting to nodes. Does that maybe mean conductor is not available? I'm not sure what this Ironic is reporting here.
So look, I didn't actually look through the Ironic code, but it looks like it's trying to contact the RabbitMQ. I don't, and it can't, but I don't know where the JSON RPC stuff is plugged in, so that might not be unusual, but yeah, it can't talk to something.
So is that a bug in the Helm charts that they used to deploy it? It says they used Helm.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of suspected that it might be.
Yeah. So maybe we should move that bug. Don't we have a repo with Helm charts in it? I'm assuming those are the ones they use.
We do.
Yeah, maybe we should move it to that repo and then label it as a bug.
Yeah, that sounds fine. Let me move this over here. GitHub doesn't have a way to move an issue, does it?
I think it does. I can look at that real quick.
Yeah.
So
In the right, you can have transfer issue.
There you go. Yeah, it's just under the listed participants there in the right column.
Cool. Nice. And you said label this as a bug. Put that in the backlog. All right. The next one is manual validation should be applied to YAML when any of the subparameters of supported parameters are not present. So
yeah, this is regarding actually some of the parameters we are adding into YAML. Let's say currently we have decided that 4 parameters, RAM, disk, CPU, and NIC. And out of that, if user has given only one parameter or filled values for only CPUs, RAM, disk, NIC are empty. So whether we should raise a warning in that case, or we should report as error, because anyway user has filled for one. So that's the issue. So
did you say this was a feature?
no, I think this is a bug we found.
Yeah, kind of bug, like we can say, because yeah, invalid things would be.
So let me ask Mail and Doug that whether what we should think in that case if some of the parameters are empty and user hasn't filled.
Do you have a preference for priority? Just put it in backlog.
Yeah, sure.
And
the next one is on the similar, on the similar lines, like for subparameters, you do not define any values. So both the bugs are for the validation purpose. So
yeah, these are the validations. Maybe currently the CR validations which we are putting are covering as part of struct types. These are not covering these validations. Maybe we have to write it for another separate function or something which would cover these validations.
Okay, sounds good. I think that was it. Yep, that is it for the triage.
Yeah, there was an item I added to the agenda, so maybe we can go back to this. I can share the Okay, so Forkat, you're on the call.
Sure. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I wanted to discuss about the VMO reorganization. This is a part of the work that you are trying to pivot, actually, to be able to make the ClassCTL in the Metal3 dev. So I added the proposal documentation in the Metal3 docs regarding the reorganization of the BMO folder, specifically in the deploy folder. And there was a discussion on the proposal document, and it's still there. It would be very great if you take a look and then give a feedback on that.
Yeah, that would be great. I recall having like a question for maybe like if Doug is in the call, like maybe directly talking about this extra repository that to contain the for the deployments. So like first, Doug, are you in the call or?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay, great. Yes, so you were suggesting to create this this new repository to host like all the deployment like options, let's say for BMO and Ironic.
Yeah. So I want to apologize because I've not been following some of this work really closely. I only got involved when I found one little piece that had broken the operator SDK update. And that's why I've been really conservative about reviewing or looking at other changes in that area, because I don't know exactly what you're trying to do. And I know that it broke things once. So I'm trying to, stay out of the way. But it seemed like it made sense to, we have other sets of deployment instructions. We just talked about the Helm charts. I know that in OpenShift, we have a completely different way that we manage the deployment. And rather than baking deployment into the repo with the code, maybe it made sense to say, here is an option for dealing with deployment using Kustomize and creating a repository for that.
But would that mean then that we would completely extract all Ironic pieces from bare metal operator to put that in this new new repository? Or do you see still the need to have like the Ironic deployment as part of the BMO deployment?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a question we would have to answer. I had assumed that we would leave a minimal deployment. So let me try and rephrase that in a less confusing way. A minimal YAML file that described a deployment for a fully functional bare metal operator in the repository, but that it would be just an example of that and would not necessarily be how we recommended that someone run it in production. Since we already have 2 or 3 different options for that, we want to show sort of all the pieces that you need to go together as a documentation thing, but not necessarily say this is exactly how you need to do it always, if that makes sense.
Yes, definitely. So in that case, because basically from our side, the requirement is that on BMO, there would be like the strict minimum to just run BMO only, so that we can, there would be one customization that includes just the CRDs, the manager, like the operator, sorry, the parameter operator, the roles, and like basically really just to get BMO running, so that we can include that as part of the CAPM3 deployment. Then how we deploy Ironic and everything would then be separated. So it like putting it in a new repo could make sense. It could also just be in another directory within the same like parameter operator repo, so that we can have like another like customization that would link both BMO and the Ironic deployment, so that we are able to deploy this minimum working example as you were talking about.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. So the work that's going on with Kustomize is not about deploying all of Metal Cubed, it is really just about deploying the operator and Ironic either together or separately or optionally.
Exactly.
So okay.
So the end goal is that we want to have BMO as part of the CAPM3 deployment, so that it's managed by clusterctl, because clusterctl does some changes to the CRDs and all that, so that it's able to pivot properly.
Okay,
so
it is part of the overall deployment of all of Metal Cubed in that configuration. Like you would have one deployment resource that described how to run the cluster API provider and the bare metal operator.
Yes, but not Ironic.
But not Ironic. Okay, so yeah, that says to me that it doesn't belong with either the bare metal operator or the cluster API provider code, that it's a separate thing because it combines both of them, right? I mean, maybe not. Maybe I'm making things harder by saying we should use a different repo. I just it seemed like it was worth bringing up and discussing. So.
The part that integrates BMO in CAPM3, this is like pretty straightforward to put in place in the CAPM3, and it should be in CAPM3 because how it is referred in clusterctl is that we give the CAPM3 repository and it just gets the deployment file from the release of CAPM3. So that deployment file will then need to include the deployment for BMO, even if it's part of the CAPM3 repository.
Okay, sure, that makes sense. So would it be pulling content out of the bare metal operator repository, or would it just be inline in the CAPM3 repository?
We don't want to duplicate all the RBAC and the roles and all this, the CRDs, because then it can go out of sync very, very easily, specifically considering that we don't have a proper versioning for BMO. So the option that we are more inclined to take right now would be to, because Customize can fetch resources over like HTTP, so you can just give it the GitHub repository with the path to find that customization, and then it will just pull it in. So the idea would be that in the CAPM3 customization, we just put a link to the BMO customization that contains just a simple bare metal operator deployment, like really just the CRD, the RBAC, and the operator, no Ironic whatsoever.
Yeah, okay. What do we do in that configuration for a development setup for the bare metal operator with somebody running that locally? Do we just have a separate deployment that shows how to run Ironic, and then you run the bare metal operator outside of the cluster, like using whatever it is, make run, I think? Or do we have a different setup for that?
You could also, because the customizations on their own are standalone, so it's possible to just use the base BMO customization to just deploy BMO, and then use whatever method you want to deploy Ironic if you just want to run BMO and Ironic.
Okay.
We could even make a customization to deploy Ironic in a different repository, and then another overlay customization that pulls in both BMO and Ironic, so that you have only one deployment that has at the end it will have the same effect as what we have right now, having BMO and Ironic in the same customization.
Okay.
That's also something.
Yeah, okay. I think you've convinced me that we should leave everything in the bare metal operator repository, and that we should go ahead. It sounds like you have a plan, a well-formed plan worked out that you should go ahead with what you're planning to do. And I think as long as, and I think we have the job in place now to verify that things don't break the operator SDK. So as long as that continues to be true, I'm less concerned about moving things around in the repo after your explanation. So.
So basically what we would then do would be move out like this ironic part out of the deploy folder and maybe create an ironic deploy folder or something, where we would put all the ironic pieces, and
Sure,
something on top that could a customization on top that would call both of the resources if someone wants to deploy just BMO and ironic.
Yeah, I could go along with that. That makes sense.
Okay, so then should we still update maybe the proposal document and then start changing the PRs and push the PRs for this?
Yeah, I always like to write things down. So if you don't mind updating the doc, then it just that seems like a good first step, and we could get that in, and then you could go ahead with the rest of the changes.
It's already pretty much like this, because that's the option that we were like envisioning, like how it is now. Like there is I think Folkat, you have put the tree there, like how it would be looking like, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
there's and an ironic, as you said, Mal, it would be outside of the BMO. So there is a separate folder for that, like ironic deployments, and all the files are inside that folder. Yeah.
Okay, so we would have this deploy that has only ironic, only bare metal operator, and then something else for ironic.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I don't know if anybody else has opinions or input or whatever. I don't want it to be left up to me.
But yeah, please comment on the document if like there's anything that comes to mind, and then we'll go forward with the PRs. Great. Thanks a lot for the discussion, and thanks for bringing this up, Folkat.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. We are pretty much at time anyway, so we'll close this meeting here. I'll post the recording on YouTube as soon as I have it ready, and I wish you a nice day.
Okay, thank you.